So today, I want to fill in some of the gaps from the Rhythm 1 video, some things that could be, clarified or expanded on, and we can maybe get a little bit of practice with some of the basic concepts that we approached in the last video, such as a grouping of beats. And once we have these groupings of beats in our minds while we're listening to music, we can begin to actually count along. We can figure out how the composer has arranged the music to correspond with these beats or to divert from them. And sometimes that is all the more interesting when that happens. So you have this basic grid in the background, you have this basic beat of 1, 2, 3, 4, or you have the eighth notes, the twice as fast, going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and or you have the 16th notes going even twice as fast as that and going 1 e and a 2 e and a 3 e and a 4 e and a, like that. So we'll get a little bit of practice looking into how to count along with some music. Now, that piece that we heard at the very beginning, that was from Beethoven. That was his Sonata Opus 3 number 2, the sonata in C major in his career. And this piece, is the classical of classical music, right? It's sort of a dense piece. It has a lot of moving notes, but it is still countable, and it's still basically countable in our 1, 2, 3, 4 grouping. And that's because this piece is like the other ones we looked at last time, the Bach and the Charlotte de Witte. This piece is organized into groups of 4 before we begin to start another group of 4 beats. So we will get a chance to look closer at this and how to count along. But at first, why don't we just try to feel the beat? Remember, so in the techno song last time, we were able to feel the beat. And then it was going, it was having that down up. Okay, so with this one, can we feel the beat? Can we figure out where the beat is? So let's listen again, and this time we'll try to feel where the beat is. Maybe just nod your head or tap along if you can. So let's give that a go. Okay, ready? Now, if you're like me, you might hear at first this slower pulse. Let's listen. So I'm nodding my head. So I'm nodding my head like this with the piece, and I feel like when it goes down, when my head goes down, that's like an important moment. So this part of counting is figuring out where things start and where things end, and how that creates a pulse or creates a beat. Then we can listen to that and we can make a good educated guess about, is that the beat? And then when we look at the music, well, we see that actually we're not wrong. We're feeling the big beats. We're feeling some big beats. But this one is organized into quicker groups of 4. So where we were feeling bum, da, 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 dum, bum, bum, da, 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 dum, bum. So we have that kind of beat there. But then if we look at this music, we see, oh, okay, this is actually faster groups of 4. Like 1, da, 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 bum, 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 3, 4. Bum, ba, da, bum, 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 3, 4. Bum, dum, dum, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that is actually the beat here. And with classical music, a lot of times this is a little bit tricky to find out where the beat is. But in that first initial beat that we felt, we weren't wrong. We were just feeling every other beat in the groups of 4. So we were kind of feeling, instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, we were feeling 1, 2, 3, 4, boom. And that's about right. That's still not wrong, because every 2 measures will still end up with a group of 4. And that's the weird thing about rhythm, is it exists on all these different levels that are interacting with each other. So the important thing for this first initial lesson is just to recognize where the beat is. How does the music create a pulse? Okay, we have a couple more things to go over, and we'll come back to this piece a bit later and look a little bit closer, especially at that first measure. Okay, so this is a review from last video. So the beat or the pulse, as I've mentioned, is these fixed and regular divisions of time. Now, most music has these. Most music somewhere in the background has regular and fixed divisions of time. Now, that doesn't mean that the surface of the music, or what we're actually hearing, is always going to articulate that beat so clearly, like the techno example where it was just gum, 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 gum. In a lot of music like the Beethoven, it'll be a little bit more fluid, a little bit more subtle how it interacts with the beat. However, the beat is still there. And this doesn't go for all kinds of music, but the vast majority of things we hear have a steady, even pulse in the background, and then we just have to discover what it is. And we can represent that pulse, as we looked at last time, in quarter notes. And so then when we get 4 quarter notes, we have this grouping of 4. And as I said also last time, groupings of 4 are the by far most common organizations we can have. 4 beats per grouping, or what we'll call per measure. And this is also something musicians refer to as 4/4 time, or common time. And that just indicates that there are 4 quarter notes, 4 quarters, 4 fourths, 4 quarter notes per grouping, per measure in this case. And that is just the general symbol for 4/4 music. And we will return to time signatures in the video on rhythm 2. Okay, and as I said, we're gonna be counting these 1, 2, 3, 4. Now think back to the Charlotte de Witte, the techno. There in that piece, it was essentially even. Bum, 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 bum. So like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. All of the beats got the same general emphasis. However, if you listen to that closely and count along, you'll notice that they are still, at least in that piece and many techno pieces, still organized into groups of 4 or groups of 8, which can be reduced to groups of 4, obviously, in order to create a general sense of, coherent musical organization. So the big groups of 4, big groups of 8, those are going to be, like I said, the most common. But, the evenness of the presentation of the beats in the techno example is a little bit misleading, because in a lot of music, we have actually a beat hierarchy, or some beats are more important than others. And for example, the downbeat, the first beat of the measure, or the first beat of the group, is going to naturally gain some emphasis. This is actually how we get the sense of pulse, is we have a starting beat, something that begins. 1, 2, 3, 4. And as we noticed in the Beethoven, when we listened at first, we heard the beat as happening half as fast as it was actually written in the music. The beat was written as 4 quarter notes in the music, which went dun dun bum bum bum, dun dun bum bum, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and then when we first listened, we might have heard something a little bit more like 1 dun bum bum 4, 1 dun bum 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 4. So that would be half as fast, right? Still a big group of 4, but half as much music. Half as fast, or twice as much music in that group of 4. What we are hearing there is actually the beat hierarchy of the measure, because the measure goes 1 with a strong downbeat, 1, 2, 3, 4. Because the measure has beat 1 strong and beat 3 relatively strong compared to beats 2 and 4. Beats 1 and 3 tend to get more emphasis in the measure in our groupings of 4. So when we heard the Beethoven example, we were actually hearing every other beat, or we were hearing 1, 3, 1, 3 in how the music was written there. But that's okay, that's totally normal, and we're still recognizing, as I said, the strong beats. So we weren't wrong. We can also just know through this example that the beats are happening on multiple levels. Now, part of this beat hierarchy can be felt or, participated in by the body if we do a little bit of the conducting gesture. And this isn't something that I'm going to force you to learn for this class or reproduce for me, but it's just something that's good to know. When conductors are doing what they're doing, what are they doing? Well, in a great deal of music, they are conducting in 4/4. And what they're doing is they're having a downbeat, the strong beat, 1, and it comes down, your hand comes down, 1. And then for the second beat, you go in. Now, it's going to be backwards, but 2 comes in, and then 3 is out, and then 4 is up. So down, in, out, up, down, in, out, up. Try it yourself. This also gives a sense of the beat hierarchy, because that down, strong beat, down beat. Then beat 2 is a little lighter. 3 has that swing out. So down, in, out, up, down, in, out, up, etc., etc. Now let's return to the rhythm tree, and we see our 4 quarter notes there. This is just review again. This actually can represent a measure of 4/4, because these 4 quarter notes fit into this measure. And that would mean that all the other groups that are here would also fit into a measure of 4/4. So one whole note in a measure of 4/4 makes a measure of 4/4. Two half notes make a measure of 4/4. Four quarter notes, 4/4, makes a measure of 4/4. Eight eighth notes, 16 16th notes, etc. And we can perform these. We can go 1, 2, 3, 4, and so I can snap the beat and I can sing the notes. So let me sing. Ta, ta, ta. So there I've done first the whole note, ta, held through the whole measure. Then the half notes, ta, ta. The half notes come in on beats 1, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 3, like that. And then the eighth notes would be, as I said before, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Obviously the quarter notes, I skipped the quarter notes. Obviously the quarter notes of 1, 2, 3, 4. The quarter notes align directly with the snaps. Then if I go to the eighth notes, like I said, is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and ta 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 ta. And the 16th notes, which will divide each quarter note into groups of 4 themselves. So as I said before, we got big groups of 4 in the middle, groups of 4 down here, and groups of 4 at the smallest level. And that's how rhythm works, in nested, layered trees that fit into the measure. So if I sing the 16th notes, we'll get not just 1 and 2 and like the eighth notes had, but 1 E and a. So already dividing each quarter note into 4. 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. Okay? So then if I do the whole rhythm tree, I'll try to keep it even. Ta, 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 ta. Okay, so when I got to the 16th notes, and you can hear that I'm even with the 16th notes emphasizing the down beat, so to speak, of each one. 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. The very small groups of 4. Okay, good. And we can see the rhythm tree broken down like this, where we already know that the top is a whole note, then we have the half notes, and then the quarter notes, then the eighth notes, which there are 8 in the measure, and 16 16th notes in the measure. Good, and we saw this last time too, where the flag attaches to a note, and you can have a double flag to have the value of the note each time. And so we see these are very familiar things, an eighth note here on the left and a 16th note on the right. But let's look at a rhythm tree that breaks these down using flags. So this looks slightly different from what we were just performing, but it's actually exactly the same. If I performed through this would all sound exactly the same. You can see that the whole notes at the top, then 2 half notes there, then 4 quarter notes there, then 8 eighth notes there, then 16th notes. Before we get to actually some counting, I want to review the flags and beams and kind of clarify what exactly is the point of beams versus flags. So we have these two rhythm trees, right? And I just explained that they're exactly the same. They're exactly the same except one thing. The one on the left has beams and the one on the right is using flags. So what's the difference? Well, really, they represent the same music. Like I said, if you perform these, they will sound the same. But for ease of reading, for the musician's eyesight, and you might already notice, we are going to have beams organizing into groups that make sense in the meter, in the time signature, or in the grouping that we're using. So you can see on the left, the double beam, the 16th notes, the first 4 are beamed together. Well, in the flags are not beamed. They don't show that grouping. So just to review again, the beam is very similar to this flag because a single beam, like a single flag, means 8th notes, and double beam, like a double flag, means 16th notes. However, I say here, the beam replaces the flags when multiple notes of the same value are present and show their organization into groups. So what is important about these smaller groups? Take a look at this. The beams group the notes together to show the beat where the quarter note beat is happening. So when we count this basic beat, when we can find that basic beat, 1, 2, 3, 4, the even grid that's in the background, then we can recognize that 4 16th notes are fitting into that, and we can group those into each quarter note to make sense of them. Same with the 8th notes. They get grouped into 4 groups to represent the quarter note grid in the background. Okay? And the flags are great and useful for notes on their own, and they often appear when we have rests. But when we're just writing a straight 16th note pattern, the flags are really challenging to read. And basically, you can write them, but your musicians will be mad at you if they are trying to perform and they're just reading all these mess of flags that don't show where the beat is, don't show that beat hierarchy. At least with the one on the left, I can see, this is going to go 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and each of those is going to get a natural little emphasis on the quarter note. But the flags, they kind of just look like just a kind of mess, and it's hard to count. So when you're a musician and you're performing and you see flags, especially many flags together, they're very difficult to count. So why not just beam them together, show where the beat is, make it easier on your musician. That is the main purpose of beaming. Okay, so let's come back to the Beethoven and let's look closer at the first measure and just how would we count this and how would we read this, begin to read this as music without paying attention to the notes. We should just recognize that everything that we see stacked up on top of each other will happen at the same time. And that's because the two musical staves that you see are connected in this case. And so all of those notes that are vertically aligned are happening at the same time. And the horizontal flow of the piece goes this way. We read from left to right. So let's take a look. How would we begin to count this? Well, first we have to recognize what these note values are. So first, well, we see these big open note heads, no stem. That's our whole note. And we know that whole notes get 4 quarter notes. Think back to the rhythm tree. Within the whole note is contained 2 half notes, which divide then into 4 quarter notes. When we look at a piece like this, and we see a whole note that takes up the measure, we know this is a piece in 4/4, a piece that has 4 quarter notes in the background. Now, this music does not have 4 quarter notes on the surface. We don't see any quarter notes actually in this measure, but we can understand them, imagine them, and remember in the background that grid is there, and that will help us count and organize this music. So musicians do this all the time. They'll say to you, like, are you counting? We have to be counting. Counting, and we don't mean out loud, obviously, it's counting in your head. Counting in your head, or having this grid in your imagination in the background. When we have a whole note, we should imagine a long stretched out note that lasts exactly 4 quarter notes. Ta. Now we see that stacked on top of that is a half note. That one is actually only going to last half as long. That one's going to take up 2 quarter notes. And so that takes up that half note, that first stack takes up half the measure. Now it doesn't look like half the measure because it looks like there's a bunch of stuff that happens after that. But know that between the half notes and the whole notes, that half note takes up half of this measure, or 2 quarter notes. Ta. So you can start to hear how we're going to get this sound, because at the end we have these 2 eighth notes, and the eighth notes fit into 1 quarter note, and then in the middle we have these 4 16th notes, and the 4 16th notes also fit into 1 quarter note. So 2 eighth notes fit into 1 quarter note, the last quarter note, and 4 16th notes fit into that quarter note, while the whole note at the bottom lasts the whole time. So I'll just play a few of these on the piano. If we have the whole note 1 2 3 4, that will last the whole time. And if I play the 2 notes above it that make the half note, we'll have 1 2 3 4. Okay, and then if I add in the 16th notes, 1 2 1 2 3 and 4 and. Okay, there's our measures. You can see that the 4 notes that are stacked on top of each other vertically happen all at the same time. And then the 16th notes happen in groups of 2, but they could just be single notes alone. But they happen together. They happen to happen together. And that happens while the lowest 2 notes hold the whole time. Okay, so now that we have a sense of how all of these parts fit together to make the whole measure, the whole note lasting the whole time at the bottom, the half note lasting half as long, and then moving into the 16th notes, which take up that 3rd quarter note, and then the 2 eighth notes, which take up that 4th quarter note. Now we can see if we could actually count this, apply counts to this. Well, we know that the first thing we'll need is the basic beat, the 1 2 3 4. And we should always show where the basic beat is if we're writing out counts. Now, beat 2, interestingly enough, is missing. It's absent. It doesn't get a beat, right? Like in the techno song, every beat got a strike, an attack. Ta, 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 ta. But in this, we have ba, da, da, bum, ba, da, da, bum. So nothing actually happens on beat 2. 1, da, da, bum, 1, 3 4, and so we can put beat 2, we can leave it there, but we'll put it in parentheses because nothing actually sounds on beat 2 except what is being held from beat 1. So we know we're going to have beat 2 in parentheses there. Then with beat 3 and 4, we are going to want to actually break them up further because we need to be able to count every attack in the measure. And because there's 16th notes in beat 3 and 8th notes in beat 4, we'll want to break those up and have a different way of counting them. Now remember, for 8th notes we had the ands. So when we added 8th notes, we didn't just have the quarter notes 1, 2, 3, 4, but we now have also the 8th notes 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, like the hi-hats in the techno song. Like that 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Then with 16th notes, we're going to need an even further counting division. So not just ands, but what a lot of musicians use, and you can make up any system you like, but a lot of musicians use for 16th notes 1 E and a. So that breaks it up 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. We can apply those counts to 16th notes when we see them. So this measure, if we apply counts to it, would look something like this. 1, beat 2 in parentheses because it's not sounding. 3 E and a because all 4 16th notes sound there. 3 E and a, 4 and. And then we have a way of actually counting this measure. Now, when we count it out loud, we probably don't want to sing 2. We can whisper it or just have it in the back of our minds, but we sing all the attacks. And then we'll be reproducing the piece in a way just by counting. 1, 3 E and a, 4 and 1. 3 E and a, 4 and 1. And that makes a nice rhythm, which is actually the main rhythm in this piece that gets used a whole lot. Now, when we're actually counting this in this piece, it's actually pretty challenging to count the 16th notes unless we go considerably slower, because at the speed he's going, we're hearing the beats at this speed, 1, 2, 3, 4, meaning the 16th notes are 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, which is pretty fast to count along. 1, 3 and a, 4 and 1, 3 and a, 4 and. Listen, see if you can hear also the lowest line or the lowest notes in there. The bass line, when it comes in, it starts coming in on the beat. Bum, 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 bum. And let's count a little bit along with it. Okay, I have one more quick example to show us of counting and of a way we can come to understand melodies that we hear. And this is just to get us practice with hearing something, finding the beat, and then counting along with it. This track is Dua Lipa, Hallucinations. Came out last year, and this is a dance track, dance pop. It's definitely inspired by house and techno music because of the beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. That we hear strongly emphasized in the drums. So you won't miss a beat listening to this song. But the melody is not always, what Dua Lipa is singing herself is not always right on the grid. Sometimes it has little moments that shift off of the grid, which make it all that much more exciting. So that is the tension inherent in rhythm itself. That in the background, there's this everlasting flow, this constant pulse. And in the foreground, what we hear on the surface is more varied, is a subtler presentation of that, but still is connected back and refers back to that basic pulse. And then that creates a tension, that creates a sort of push and pull between the melody, the rhythm of the melody, and the rhythm of the drums. And that push and pull, that tension, creates energy in the song, or interest. All right, let's just have a listen to my quick rendition of this melody. That little at the end. Okay, so in this piece, it's pretty straightforward, right? We just have this mostly 8th note pulse going on that happens over the background beat, which is in quarter notes. Bum 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 bum. So notice at the second measure, notice at the third measure where the 2 quarter notes come in. It's all 8th notes and then there's 2 quarter notes. That right there, they do align with the beat. Bum 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 ba ba. See, they happen right on the beat. Ba, ba, bum, 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 ba, dum, bum, bum, ba. When the quarter notes come in, they last a whole beat versus the 8th notes, which include the and of the beat. So the and of beat 1, the and of beat 2, etc. And that's just to say, once again, that this grid, this quarter note beat grid happens in the background. And you can hear it actually, it's not just in the background, it's actually on the surface of this music too, because you can hear it in the drums, in the bass. You can hear it in the kick drum. The bass line is actually syncopated, is actually a little bit off. We can talk about that in a future video. But for now, we're just focused on that background, steady background beat. And then the eighth notes, we can start to count, as we know, keeping that group of 4 in the background. But then the second eighth note of each beat, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and they also need counts because they sound. So we're going to add the ands in there to show that this is all happening in eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and you can see how we might progress. 1 and 2 and wait. Okay, this is an interesting part here, right on beat 3 of the second measure there, we have a rest, and it's an eighth note rest we might recognize from the rest tree that I presented in the last video, in rhythm 1. But beat 3 then needs to not sound. It needs to be, the count should be in parentheses. We can still show where beat 3 is, but we should put it in parentheses because it's not sounding. So we're going to have beat 3 in parentheses and then have the and of beat 3 shown right after that to show where that eighth note comes in. And interestingly, that eighth note after the rest is going to get a little bit more emphasis, and in fact it's the beginning of the next line. It's the beginning of something new. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 4 and 1 and 2 and... So you see how that and 4 and comes in to lead on to the next measure. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 4 and 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 4 and... So you can see that that last measure of that line is the same as measure 2. Here, Dua Lipa is cleverly having some repetition, some rhythmic repetition, just like we saw in the Beethoven, which reinforces this in our minds as the kind of like rhythmic feeling of this song. Now, just to finish off, the next 2 measures are different from the first 4, but are the same as each other, right? And we can notice that they're different notes. They sound different. Okay, but they are the same rhythm. 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and... Because now 3 doesn't get an and. We pause now on 3. 3, which is interesting because 3 was the thing that was left out before. But now we have kind of like the landing point on beat 3. 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and 1. So you can see that those 2 are the same when I write out the counts. 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and 1. And then after the 1 of the last measure here, we get an eighth note rest. So that finishes that beat. It makes that eighth note short. The end of the line is kind of short. Hallucinate. And it just kind of clicks, ends there. Then we have an eighth note rest to fill in that first beat. Then beats 2 and 3 are also rests. And then 4 and we have just the last beat, beat 4, divided into an eighth note and then 2/16. So it's not 4 and we can leave the E out because it just says 4 and not 4 and not all 4 are there. It's an eighth note plus 2/16, 4 and Just like if we had 2/16 and then an eighth, it would be 4 and. So we can leave out the 16th notes and the eighth notes that don't happen and just count, or we can have some of those 16th notes there and some of them not there, but the counts can then reflect what's on the page. So then the whole thing, just to perform it one more time, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 4 and 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and 1, 2, 3. All right. So hopefully that gives you a basic idea of counting and the 4/4 time pattern, which, as I say, is going to be our most common grouping and is kind of the first one we should learn in order to generalize this knowledge to any other kind of grouping.